My ex cheated on me with my brother. My ex-wife cheated on me with my brother. Now, after he replaced her with someone else and kicked her out of his house, she's begging me for help. This entire situation has been a whirlwind of emotions, pain, and hard lessons. Let me take you back to where it all began. Candace and I were married for almost 10 years. In those years, I believed we had a stable and fulfilling life together. We weren't perfect, but who is? We had a decent home, steady jobs, and a circle of mutual friends. Our marriage seemed strong, or at least I thought so. Looking back, it's clear there were cracks I failed to notice. Perhaps I trusted too much, blinded by love and the comfort of routine. Jonathan, my younger brother, had always been a wild card. From an early age, he had a reputation for being a charmer and a womanizer. He thrived on attention and never seemed interested in building meaningful, lasting relationships. While I settled into a life of stability and commitment, Jonathan flitted from one relationship to another, often leaving a trail of broken hearts behind him. Our parents, friends, and even casual acquaintances warned him about his behavior, but he never seemed to care. For Jonathan, life was about living in the moment, and women in particular, were just temporary fixtures in his world. The betrayal unfolded slowly, like a creeping shadow I failed to notice until it was too late. Candace began acting differently, a little more distant, a little less engaged in our conversations. At first, I attributed it to stress. We all have our bad days, right? But the signs became harder to ignore. Late-night texts, unexplained absences, and a growing emotional wall between us painted a picture I wasn't ready to see. When I finally discovered the affair, it felt like my world had collapsed. The pain of being betrayed by both my wife and my brother was indescribable. It wasn't just about losing Candace. It was the gut-wrenching realization that someone I had trusted and loved my entire life had stabbed me in the back. Jonathan had done this before in smaller ways during our youth, stealing a crush or making light of my struggles. But this was a betrayal on an entirely different level. Confronting them was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Candace tried to justify her actions, claiming that Jonathan made her feel alive again. Her words cut deep. Did I fail her as a husband? Was I not enough? Jonathan, on the other hand, was unapologetically arrogant. He dismissed the gravity of what they'd done and even blamed me. According to him, I hadn't kept Candace happy, and as a single man, he had every right to pursue whoever he wanted. His lack of remorse was staggering. Our marriage ended quickly after that. Candace moved in with Jonathan, who promised to take care of her. For a time, I tried to focus on picking up the pieces of my shattered life. I sought therapy to help me process the betrayal and the overwhelming feelings of anger and sadness. My therapist helped me see that their actions were a reflection of their character, not my worth. But understanding that didn't make it hurt any less. Meanwhile, Jonathan and Candace's relationship progressed, or at least it seemed to. Jonathan convinced Candace to quit her job, promising to support her financially. He played on her insecurities, suggesting that her desire to work might lead to infidelity, just as it had in our marriage. Looking back, I see how manipulative he was. Candace, perhaps out of guilt or naivete, agreed. She became entirely dependent on him, giving up her career and any semblance of independence. For a while, I distanced myself from both of them. I threw myself into work, trying to rebuild my life and regain a sense of normalcy. But the pain lingered. Every time I heard about Jonathan's antics or Candace's new life with him, it felt like salt in the wound. I couldn't escape the shadow of their betrayal, no matter how hard I tried. As expected, Jonathan didn't change. His pattern of infidelity continued, and Candace became one of many women caught in his web. Despite his cheating, Jonathan managed to manipulate Candace into staying. He used the same charm and cunning that had drawn her away from me, convincing her that leaving him would be a mistake. Their toxic relationship mirrored the dysfunction Jonathan had carried with him for years. Eventually, the inevitable happened. Jonathan met someone he decided was worth replacing Candace for. Without any regard for her feelings, he kicked her out of his house. Candace, who had given up her career and independence, found herself with nothing. She had no job, no money, and nowhere to go. In her desperation, she turned to me. When Candace showed up at my door, it was a surreal moment. She looked worn down, a shadow of the confident woman I once knew. She begged for forgiveness, tears streaming down her face. She admitted that trusting Jonathan was the biggest mistake of her life and confessed to regretting everything she had done. She told me I had been the best thing in her life and that she had thrown it all away for a fleeting illusion. At first, I didn't know how to respond. A part of me felt vindicated seeing her so broken after everything she had done. But another part of me, a softer, more compassionate side, felt sorry for her. I could see the pain and regret in her eyes. Yet, the wounds she and Jonathan had inflicted on me were still fresh in my mind. Could I really forgive her? Should I? I asked her why she came to me and not someone else. Her response was a mix of desperation and honesty. She said she had no one else to turn to. Jonathan had isolated her from her friends, and her own family had grown distant because of her actions. She admitted she had burned every bridge, but hoped that I, of all people, could find it in my heart to help her. I told her I needed time to think. That night, I sat alone in my living room, wrestling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, Candace had betrayed me in the most painful way imaginable. On the other hand, I had once loved her deeply. Could I ignore her cries for help and turn her away in her time of need? Ultimately, I decided to offer her a temporary place to stay, not as a gesture of reconciliation, but out of basic human decency. I made it clear that this didn't mean I forgave her or that we could ever go back to how things were. Candace was grateful, but visibly ashamed. During her stay, she opened up about her time with Jonathan. She told me how he had belittled her, controlled her, and eventually discarded her like she meant nothing. She admitted that she had been blind to his true nature and that her regret ran deeper than words could express. As I listened to her, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to say, "I told you so," but another part of me felt a strange sense of closure. Hearing her acknowledge her mistakes and the pain she caused me validated everything I had gone through. It didn't erase the hurt, but it helped me take another step toward healing. In the weeks that followed, I helped Candace get back on her feet. I connected her with a career counselor and encouraged her to seek therapy. Slowly, she began rebuilding her life. While our relationship would never be the same, I found a sense of peace in knowing that I had done the right thing not for her, but for myself. Helping her wasn't about rekindling old feelings or seeking revenge. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above the pain and bitterness. Candace eventually moved out and started over. We've kept our distance since then, exchanging only the occasional message. As for Jonathan, I've cut him out of my life completely. Some wounds are too deep to heal, and his betrayal was unforgivable. I've learned to focus on myself and the people who truly value me. This experience taught me that betrayal doesn't define me. It's not a reflection of my worth, but rather of the choices others make. While the scars remain, they serve as reminders of my strength and resilience. And as for Candace and Jonathan, they're just chapters in my story, chapters I've closed as I move forward into a brighter future. Her words stirred a mix of emotions in me. Part of me felt sorry for her. Seeing someone I once loved in such a vulnerable state was heartbreaking. But another part of me couldn't forget the betrayal. I couldn't forget the nights I spent alone, questioning my worth and reliving the pain of their actions. How could she ask for my help now, after everything she had done? I told her the truth. I reminded her of the life we had shared, the trust she had broken, and the pain she had caused. I told her it was ironic that she'd come to me for help after betraying me so deeply. I explained that while I understood her desperation, I couldn't let her back into my life. She had made her choices, and now she had to face the consequences. With a heavy heart, I asked her to leave. Watching her walk away was difficult, but I knew it was the right decision for my own well-being. From what I've heard, she's now staying at a shelter. While I still feel some sympathy for her, I can't bring myself to help her directly. I've considered reaching out to her parents, encouraging them to support her, but I need to protect my own peace. That night, as I sat alone reflecting on everything, I felt a strange sense of closure. The betrayal, heartbreak, and fallout from Candace and Jonathan's actions were painful chapters in my life, but they also taught me invaluable lessons. I realized that my worth wasn't determined by their choices, and that my future didn't have to be defined by my past. Over the following months, I focused on healing. I reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and slowly opened myself up to the possibility of love again. Each day was a step forward, a testament to my resilience and determination to build a better future for myself. However, healing wasn't a linear journey. Some days, the memories of the betrayal would resurface, and I'd find myself overwhelmed by a wave of sadness or anger. On those days, I turned to journaling, pouring out my thoughts onto paper. Writing became a form of therapy for me, a way to process my emotions and let go of the pain. I also sought guidance from a therapist who helped me navigate the complexities of forgiveness and self-worth. Slowly but surely, I began to feel lighter. One pivotal moment in my journey came when I stumbled upon an old photo album. It was filled with pictures of happier times, moments shared with Candace and Jonathan before everything fell apart. At first, the sight of those images brought a lump to my throat. But as I flipped through the pages, I realized that those memories didn't have to define me. They were a part of my story, yes, but they didn't dictate my future. I decided to put the album away, not out of avoidance, but as an act of moving on. It was time to focus on creating new memories. One day, I received a call from Candace's parents. They told me they had finally forgiven her and were willing to help her rebuild her life. They thanked me for showing patience and understanding, acknowledging that I had every right to be bitter but had chosen a different path. Their words brought a sense of relief and closure. Knowing that Candace would have the support she needed allowed me to fully let go of the lingering guilt and sadness. In the months that followed, I threw myself into my passions. I took up photography, something I'd always been interested in, but had never pursued seriously. Capturing the beauty of the world through my lens became a source of joy and inspiration. I also started volunteering at a local community center, mentoring young people who were navigating their own challenges. Helping others gave me a renewed sense of purpose and reminded me of the resilience of the human spirit. During this time, I also reconnected with an old friend, Sarah. We'd known each other in college, but had lost touch over the years. Our friendship rekindled effortlessly, and she became a pillar of support during my healing journey. Sarah's kindness and empathy reminded me of what it felt like to be truly valued and appreciated. Over time, our bond deepened, and I found myself considering the possibility of a romantic relationship again. The first time I shared my story with Sarah, I was nervous. Would she judge me? Would she think less of me for the mistakes I'd made or the pain I'd endured? But Sarah listened without judgment, offering words of comfort and understanding. She reminded me that we all carry scars, and it's how we choose to move forward that truly matters. Her support gave me the courage to embrace vulnerability and take a chance on love again. As Sarah and I grew closer, I felt a renewed sense of hope and possibility. She taught me to trust again, to believe that not everyone would betray me or take my kindness for granted. Our relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship is, but it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. For the first time in years, I felt truly happy. Looking back, I realized that the journey to healing and self-discovery is never easy. It's filled with setbacks and challenges, but it's also an opportunity to grow and learn. The betrayal I experienced was a painful chapter in my life, but it didn't define me. Instead, it became the catalyst for transformation, pushing me to prioritize my own well-being and build a life filled with love, joy, and purpose. Now, as I look toward the future, I feel a sense of hope and possibility. The wounds of the past may never fully disappear, but they've shaped me into a stronger, wiser person. I'm ready to embrace the next chapter of my life with an open heart and an unbreakable spirit. After all, happiness isn't something we find, it's something we create. Every so often, I think about Candace. I wonder how she's doing, whether she's managed to turn her life around. While I'll always carry a twinge of sadness for what was lost, I've come to accept that some relationships aren't meant to last. People come into our lives for a reason, teaching us lessons and helping us grow. Candace's chapter in my life has ended, but the lessons she taught me about resilience, self-worth, and forgiveness will stay with me forever. In the end, life is about moving forward. It's about embracing change, learning from our experiences, and creating a future that aligns with our values and aspirations. I'm grateful for the journey I've been on, even with its challenges. It's made me who I am today, a stronger, wiser, and more compassionate person. And for that, I'll always be thankful.